What's going on, YouTube? Thanksgiving weekend's coming. Happy Thanksgiving, by the way. Got a new sweater. So just trying to think. I was going to show you guys, but sunset kind of went away. I thought it was a good sunset, but anyway, the Cincinnati Bengals is the subject tonight, and along with some other things, but mainly I'm going to be talking about what I think needs to happen. See, the reason why I'm so critical of the Bengals and I'm so upset with them right now is because for the first time in probably decades, we finally have a team where we can win with. You guys don't understand. In the 90s and the early 2000s, I hardly ever got angry because I knew we were terrible. Because in the 90s, well, I was going to say the 2000s, but definitely the 90s, the Bengals were the worst organization in the league. Them and probably the Detroit Lions, which we'll get to in a minute. But I look at all these teams around us, building for the future, building, making good moves. You know why? Because they have good coaches and they got good owners. And like I said, I'm not saying Zach Taylor's a bad coach, but the problem with him is that he's got a horrible owner ahead of him, And, I look at a team like Detroit, and I keep bringing them up because they're the prime example. What happens? You get a new owner, you get a new coach, and now all of a sudden, voila, you go from one of the worst teams in the league, the laughingstock, to being 8-2 for the first time in 60 years. So, with that being said, and let's be honest about it, Jared Goff ain't no lights out quarterback. He's a decent quarterback, but he's not elite. But you know why? He's better coached than us. That's why. That's why Josh Dobbs goes to Minnesota and looks good. You know why? Because he's got a good coach and a good system. Not to mention probably a good defense and a good offensive line. So if I'm Joe Burrow right now, I'd be looking at the following. No defense, for one. Can't put up enough points. If you got no defense and you allow 400 or 500 yards a game, Joe Burrow, it wouldn't matter if Joe Burrow was 100% or not. He can't put up enough points to match the other team. Unless you expect him to throw 450 yards every single game and 5 touchdowns, then maybe, yeah, we'd have a chance. But the defense has always been the issue. And another thing that's always been the issue, number 2, he has no offensive line. He's never had an offensive line since he's been here. And, look at the numbers. What did we set last year or the year before? A record how many sacks he took in league history? That should tell you something, Mike Brown. Ding, 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 ding. Hello, Mike. Anybody upstairs? Apparently not. So, that's what I talk about, guys. See, Mike Brown is a horseshit owner. He's terrible. Because a good owner would realize, hey, I have a superstar quarterback for the first time since Boomer Esiason, or at least in my era that I've owned the team. You would think he would be going out of his way to make sure Joe Burrow is protected. And at the very least, make sure he had an offensive line, like I said, and then go after defensive players. But not Mike Brown. Mike Brown, what he does is, he's like, well, we're almost good enough, so that's okay. Mike Brown is living off Paul Brown's legacy. I've always said that. He always has been, and he's never been a good owner. Like I said, look at his track record. What has he done with this team? Honestly, what has he done? Like I said, thank God for Ryan Leaf, because an argument could be made. Akili Smith was one of the worst busts of all time. And this guy, I mean, in the 90s, early 2000s, guys, you got to understand, at this point, being 5-5 in the season 20 years ago was a huge freaking deal, because we were averaging 3-4 wins a season. A season. Like I said, at least back then I knew we were bad and couldn't compete, so I was never upset. I mean, who was our best player? What, John Kitna? Peter Warrick? Good receiver, by the way. Corey Dillon? I mean, Corey Dillon was probably the only thing we had. And Carson Palmer, he was the victim of an injury, because I think if he wouldn't have gotten injured, who knows what would have happened. But I think we would have been further along than what we were. It wouldn't have took this long for us to get a playoff win and make a Super Bowl appearance. Because I think Carson Palmer, it's too bad. It's really unfortunate what happened to him, because I think he had a lot of potential. But then you go to Andy Dalton, and you would think, I mean, how could you not see after 2 or 3 years? Sure, Andy Dalton was decent in the regular season. I'll give him that. But he was 0-3 in the playoffs at one point. And a rational person would say, and I kept saying it on my channel, this guy is not the answer. He'll get us to the dance, but don't expect him to perform. And I kept saying that for like 3 or 4 years. Like I said, we got Joe Burrow out of the deal by waiting, but at the time we didn't know that. So Mike Brown is content with being mediocre is the main issue. I mean, Marvin Lewis, yes, when he first came to Cincinnati, it was a horrible mess. And he pulled us out of the depths of hell. Okay? I'll give him that. But there again, get you to the dance, but don't ask him to perform. So he kept Marvin Lewis like 4 or 5 years too long. And I don't know, guys. This team gives me freaking hemorrhoids sometimes. I mean, seriously. It's just, I watch all these teams. I mean, the Detroit Lions, freaking 8-2 with Jared Goff. I mean, and Detroit, and not taking away anything from Detroit, they're a good team. But again, it's because they're way better coached than us. Or at the very least, they got a defense and an offensive line. You put Joe Burrow on the Detroit Lions right now, you put Joe Burrow anywhere where he's got an offensive line and a defense, he wins the Super Bowl easy. Easy. But, I mean, he took the Bengals to the Super Bowl with the worst offensive line you could ever ask for and a horrible freaking defense. A bottom 5 defense. Can you imagine what he could do with even a decent defense and a good offensive line? He would have a Super Bowl by now. If you'd put him anywhere else, I bet every other team, maybe outside of Kansas City, would take Joe Burrow right now. Here's what I worry about. Mike Brown's going to do what he normally does, not cater to his quarterback that you invested all this money in, and he's going to demand a trade. That's what I'm worried what's going to happen. Joe Burrow is obviously we're not in the head of Joe Burrow, but if I was Joe Burrow and if I came back and there was no defense and no offensive line, why the hell would I want to stay in an organization that isn't going to cater to me? Like I said, Joe Burrow's got Mike Brown by the balls right now. He can demand anything he wants. Otherwise, Joe Burrow could get another job like that in a heartbeat. So, something needs to change, and it all starts upstairs with Mike Brown. We need a new owner. I mean, just period. Mike Brown is, I mean, did you see his facial expression when we were in the Super Bowl? Here's what it was. I mean, the guy looked half dead. Does that look like a great owner to you? No. But sometimes I wonder, man, was Jesus pinned to the cross in Cincinnati? Was he? I mean, even the Cleveland Browns are a better team than we are, even with a backup quarterback, by far. Again, offensive line and a defense. Cleveland Browns are the prime example of what will happen when you have a good defense. I mean, they got a rookie quarterback, a backup rookie quarterback at that, playing, and they took down the Steelers because they have a great defense. And say what you want about Kevin Stefanski. I know he's getting a lot of heat. I don't think he must be doing something right because they're 7-3. I don't think the Browns, when was the last time they were 7-3? I can't even remember. I don't think they ever have been. At least not in my era. So that's what I think needs to go on. Obviously, this season's a wash. We already know that. I said it from the... Joe Burrow didn't look like himself from the get-go. He didn't look like himself. He was injured. And if you think about it, Mike Brown sabotaged him. He sabotaged him. Why? Like I said, you give a guy a contract when he's playing on one leg, you know he's hurt, and what's Joe Burrow going to say? No. I mean, come on. That put a ton of pressure on him. I guarantee you that's why he played hurt. Because he felt the pressure like, my God, I just got this huge contract. What am I going to do now? Say I'm hurt and I can't play? No. Any quarterback would say yes, even if they did hurt. Even if they did hurt and didn't want to play, they're not going to say no because they have a ton of pressure on them because they just got a huge contract. I kept saying to you guys, contract sometimes messes with the whole system. So I don't even blame Joe Burrow or Zach Taylor. This is all on Mike Brown. Mike Brown sabotaged him. You know why? Because he's a horse shit, piece of shit owner. I'm letting it all out tonight, guys. I'm sorry if I'm a little vocal, but I'm so sick and tired of it. I'm sick and tired. Like I said, we have a team we can build on now. We can win with. I know this team can win a Super Bowl easily. I know they can. But, like I said, all goes back to ownership and coaches. Hope you guys have a good night, and I'll be giving you the picks soon.